Hi, friends. Good afternoon, and welcome to the last planned session of continuing Quaker education with the theme of the peace testimony. We have been talking about this since October, a variety of different sessions. And so to conclude, we, the committee, thought that it would be useful just to review where we've been and continue the conversations that we've had over the course of the year. Before we kind of get into it, I do want to remind friends of what we're talking about when we use the word testimony in a Quaker context. You know, the peace testimony sounds like a big thing. It is a big thing. But it sounds like a rule. If you are Quaker, you must adhere to the peace testimony. That the peace testimony somehow is normative. It's one of the shoulds of the Quaker faith. And I don't believe that that's actually the case. Testimony is not a set of rules. Testimony is not something that we should or must do because we're Quaker. Friends' testimonies are also not goals. They're not aspirational. The peace testimony is not something that, because we are Quaker, we strive for. What testimony is, and specifically what peace testimony is, are behaviors that emerge from the body of friends, consistent enough that they can be categorized as a thing. So testimony is not forward-looking. Testimony is looking to the past and the present to understand how friends have heard and understand the Spirit, heard and understood the Spirit, and what they are led to do about it. One of the quotes that I found when I was researching my talk for October said, "The testimony against war is one of the fruits of our faith, not one of its articles." And I really like that. Now, that said, members of the Religious Society of Friends have often been moved to intervene against armed conflict and other forms of violence. So George Fox said, "All bloody principles and practices we, as to our own particulars, do utterly deny. With all outward wars and strife and fightings with outward weapons, for any end, or under any pretense whatsoever." And at a different time, George Fox also said, "I live in the virtue of that life and power that taketh away the occasion for all war." So there is certainly a long history of friends being moved by the Spirit to end war, to stop wars that were taking place in their lifetimes, and to build community structures, institutions, etc., that would remove the occasion for war, that would remove the factors that lead nation states and other groups into armed conflict. So over the past year, 8 months, we've covered a number of different aspects of the peace testimony. We talked about history, kind of how Friends have reacted to wars since the 1660s, which for the most part has been that we're against them, with a few exceptions that make me scratch my head. We have talked about peace as being more than the absence of war and violence, and how we might look for the seeds of war in all of our social, political, and economic relationships. We heard from Chloe and Mary about their personal experiences in conflict zones and the different stressors and impulses that being in those situations called forth. We had a session questioning whether war is truly inevitable. We talked about teaching children. We talked about being parents. And we had one very concrete example of an organization named Search for Common Ground. So what I'd like to do is kind of let's take a quick and somewhat disturbing look at the world today, May 7th, 2023. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, there are currently 27 ongoing armed conflicts right now in the world. And the Council on Foreign Relations, they have something called the Global Conflict Tracker. It categorizes or divides conflicts into three groups: those that are worsening, those that are unchanging, and those that are improving. And as of today, there is not a single conflict that is categorized as improving. They're all either staying the same or getting worse. Sudan being the most recent example that's been in the news. There's a lot of this going on. Mass shootings. As of a week ago, May 1st, almost 14,000 people have died from gun violence in the United States this year. That's the first 4 months of the year. That's an average of over 100 deaths every day. There have been 199 mass shootings in the United States this year, where a mass shooting is defined as 4 or more people shot or killed, not including the shooter. There was one yesterday afternoon. Someone opened fire in a mall in Dallas. He killed at least 8 people. There are 3 more in the hospital in critical condition, and the shooter was killed by an off-duty police officer himself. I started assembling kind of the statistics for today a couple of days ago. The mass shooting rate was shocking at that point. I really hoped there would not be another one before I gave this introduction. That was the first thing I saw when I woke up this morning, another mass shooting. There are any number of other causes of violence, many other significant attacks on people's autonomy and freedom. Reproductive rights in this country have been under attack for a long time since the Supreme Court decision. I think it's now 25 states have either effectively banned abortion or made it so difficult to rule out basic health care for women in their jurisdictions. LGBTQ population is under attack in this country and internationally. The ACLU is tracking almost 500 anti-LGBTQ bills that are in both national, state, and local legislatures right now. Mass incarceration is as bad or worse than it's ever been. Refugees and immigrants are under constant attack. Income inequality is stark. Tied to income, wealth inequality is actually even worse than income inequality, if you look at the percentages. Health outcomes vary widely depending on what social group and class you're in. The environment in which you live depends heavily on your race, your ethnicity, and your economic class. So there's a lot of reasons for concern at 12:33 p.m. on May 7th of 2023. I do think it's really important to keep in mind that despair and resignation is not the ideal response. Going back to George Fox, he said, "Hold fast the hope which anchors the soul, which is sure and steadfast, that you may float above the world's sea." I mean, Fox's time was not actually that much happier than ours in many ways. He did manage to keep that hope and that faith and that commitment going all of his life. And more recently, Eden Grace, who worked for FUM, both in the national office. I knew her when she was working in Kenya. Eden said, "Despair does not have the last word, for there is a light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not, will not, cannot, not ever put it out." I think it's really important for us to hold on to those pieces, as well as kind of the recognition and acknowledgement of all the things that, like I said, could cause despair, could cause resignation. And so kind of with all of that in mind, and I know I've just dropped a whole lot on you, we came up with a couple of queries that we thought would be a good way to round out the year. The first one should look vaguely familiar because we saw it in the first session. So the query is, friends' discernment around war has varied over the years. On the triangle spectrum below, has the Spirit led you in a particular direction? Where the 3 points on this spectrum are strict pacifism, kind of the utterly deny all war and strife for any cause or under any pretense whatsoever. Something closer to just war theory, where violence is a last resort, but there are circumstances where it cannot be avoided. or some other approach. So that's the first query. And then the second is, have you heard the Spirit call you to take away the occasion for all war? If so, how have you heeded that call? And then the final one is, have you been challenged to address multiple leadings or calls that conflict with other responsibilities?
It's the day that the Lord has